angels waging war in the unseen realm. Global events fulfilling biblical prophecy. Eternal life. What lies beyond mortality? From analyzing the paranormal from a biblical worldview to the discussion of cutting-edge science and technology. Conspiracy, discovery, special investigative reports. Unafraid to explore the challenging issues facing humanity. Welcome to another edition of Skywatch TV. Special investigative report.
They accurately predicted the resignation of Pope Benedict, something that happened in hundreds and hundreds of years. And now they're making an even bolder prediction for what lies ahead in 2016. Welcome to Skywatch TV. This is our multi-part special investigative report about the forthcoming book by the international best-selling authors Tom Horn and Cris Putnam. The book, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade. We welcome back to the program Tom Horn and Cris Putnam. The Cumae Sibyl. I always thought that the Cumae Sibyl was just a mythological creature. Frankly, I was not even aware until recently when I began preparing for these interviews that she was an historic person. And not only that, that Jewish theologians and early church fathers actually took the Cumae Sibyl's prophecy seriously.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a pagan prophetess, right?
Yes.
Of pagan Rome who delivered prophecies. You go to the temple and offer a sacrifice or whatever. And, they had books of prophecies and sayings of the Sibyls. And there was actually more than one Sibyl. As the Roman Empire spread, all the capital cities would have their own version of the Sibyl. And it turns out there was one even in Jerusalem at the time. And so, they collected all these prophecies. So you have the Sibylline oracles, the Sibylline books, and we have copies of a lot of these. Now, a lot of them became somewhat Christianized, and the Jews also used them. And so some scholars will say that they were changed by Christians and altered and things of that nature, but sometimes maybe not so, because we see something like Justin Martyr in the 2nd century quoting the Sibyl in his apologetic to the pagan Romans, saying, look, even your Sibyl was monotheistic in these passages. And it, really interesting that he would do that. So you have a lot of that going on, and you find a lot of these prophecies, our only source of it is from the early Christian church, from their quotations, because the original books have been lost. Now, how does this all connect to our investigation? Well, we were really looking into this idea that the Muslims have of the Mahdi, who's going to make the whole world Muslim. Mm-hmm. And this is, they expect a regular man to be born. He's not Jesus, right? He's a human, but he's supposed to make the whole world become Muslim. Now, how's that going to happen?
Yeah, and just to give people a sense of the time scale involved here, Muhammad didn't found the religion until the 7th century.
That's right.
So we're talking about 6 centuries between the time of the Sibyls and the Sibylline oracles,
right,
and Muhammad.
Mm-hmm. Now, how does that connect, right? Well, there was a piece of literature called the Apocalypse of Methodius, and that was really popular in the 600s in Syria. Okay, and it was written in Syriac, in the Syrian language.
Okay,
and it became a mainstay of the early Christian church in that time, and it probably was for 1,000 years. And people believed that it was scripture, basically. It turns out now we don't think that he wrote it. It's pseudepigrapha is what we call it now, because there's just some things that are giveaways. But in that piece of literature, there's a character they call the Great Roman Emperor, okay? And really, we believe that not only the Catholics believe that this great Roman Emperor is going to make the whole world Catholic, all right? And at the same time, this is in the 600s, and you think about historically what's going on. The Quran has just been composed, and Islam is beginning to promulgate across the land.
And of course, the Western Roman Empire had fallen in the 5th century. 476 was when the German Magister Militum Odoacer basically deposed the last emperor. So we don't need you anymore.
Right.
I'm going to be the first king of Italy. But Rome at that time still existed. It was just the Eastern Roman Empire centered on what is now Turkey, Byzantium.
That's right. And so, they have all these prophecies about Constantinople, and which doesn't exist anymore. Now it's Istanbul, right? Because the Ottoman Empire conquered it, and which kind of makes some of ISIS's predictions seem a little incoherent in that they want to conquer Constantinople, which isn't there anymore. This character, the great Roman emperor, featured in this apocalypse. What we find in Muslim eschatology is a lot of it is more a response to Christians than it is original. I mean, you see the same characters as the book of Revelation. You have the Dajjal, which is like the Antichrist. You have Jesus. They call him Isa. And, it's just like they took the book of Revelation and they Islamified it, okay? And so where does the Mahdi come from? Because he's not in the Quran.
That's true.
And I can't find anything where you can really prove that Muhammad said anything about a Mahdi. And so scholars have looked at this, and I read a lot of books and papers about it, and it really, really, really looks like the Mahdi is just a response to the great Roman emperor, which came from this apocalypse of Methodius. So it's basically an anti-apologetic.
Well, I guess that's not too surprising, because the Quran, and I don't want to deviate from the topic of the book here, but the Quran is essentially just a corrupted version of the holy texts given to Jews and Christians. But setting that aside, what then? How does this relate to where we are today? I mean, where does this lead, and what does it lead you to conclude about what we can expect for the rest of 2016 and the years ahead?
Well, as I was discovering all this, I was thinking, how am I going to tie all this together with our work? And why are we doing this? How does this all fit together? Well, what I discovered is this idea of the great Roman emperor wasn't original either. Whoever wrote the Apocalypse of Methodius copied it from the Sibylline prophecies. So it goes way back into pagan Rome. Now we start getting a really interesting connection, because Tom Horn, in his book Apollyon Rising, and then Zenith 2016, connected a prophecy of the Sibyl to the Great Seal of the United States, and this idea that perhaps the Antichrist would be a great leader from the United States.
Well, and also there is a deeper mystery here that once again Cris uncovered. It's kind of like in Petrus Romanus, when Cris found what had been written by Rene Thibault 64 some years ago, that kind of put us on this trail that ultimately wound up with us making our prediction. This time around, he's back there in antiquity again. We can't keep this guy in the modern world, right? And he's digging around, and what he discovers is, up until probably the 1600s, this idea of the great Roman emperor. So what do we mean by that? The Roman Catholics believed that there would come a time in which there would be basically a Catholic king. The Holy Roman Pope would become king of the earth, or something like that. That's why many of the Protestant reformers, they're looking at this thinking, this is going to be the Antichrist, right? But those were borrowed from prophecies that originated with the Cumae Sibyl, with these Roman, and then later the Greeks had their own version of the Sibyls. Apostle Paul cast a demon out of the young woman in the New Testament. Well, she was a Sibylline, a Pythoness. She was a prophetess for the god Apollo. But if you go to the Vatican City today and go inside the Sistine Chapel, you have the great paintings by Michelangelo, right? But why, right there among all of the Old Testament prophets, is the Sibyl? I mean, the Cumae Sibyl, what in the world is she doing being honored among all the Old Testament prophets there inside the Vatican? But then you come over to the United States of America, and you start noticing these similarities, that the way Rome is laid out, you have a dome facing an obelisk, which is an ancient symbol, which was used actually, and it was made most famous by the Egyptians, who used it for raising the spirit of Osiris from the underworld to become incarnate in their pharaoh so that it would have divine representation. But again, a divine king. The whole prophecy about the final Roman Empire plays off of this idea of a final divine king, a God incarnate who is going to lead the world in the end of times, what the New Testament would call the Antichrist, right? The son of perdition, the Nimrod reborn. So you have the generator at the Vatican to make it happen, the dome, the obelisk. You even have the Cumae Sibyl glorified inside their most famous chapel, whose prophecy says this entity is coming. You come over to the United States, and what do you find? You have the dome at the capital city.
Right.
The dome facing the obelisk. And what do you have on the Great Seal of the United States of America but the prophecies that are derived from the Cumae Sibyl? And what does she say? That at the end of time, this great king, it's going to be Apollo, she says, reborn on the earth at the end of time, and he is going to become the king of the new world order. So you have the most ancient, deeply occultic, powerful symbols combined with a primary source for these prophecies, which say that at the end of time, who the New Testament identifies as the Antichrist, is going to become the king of the final world order. Well, in this book, therefore, based on that general idea, we make the biggest predictions. We did accurately predict the resignation of Pope Benedict a year in advance. That pales by comparison to the detailed roadmap that we provide in this book for the very near future, and we literally detail how each event is going to happen, how it's going to unfold, and ultimately we believe it's going to lead to Armageddon.
And you can get a hint from the cover art as to what may be expected here. You see the Islamic State flag there on the obelisk there at St. Peter's Square. You've got two characters, one Roman Catholic, one Muslim, both occupying essentially the same position in their prophecies, one drawn from the other. We'll talk about that as our special investigative report into the book, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade continues right after this.
In 2012, they shocked the international community when they predicted the resignation of Pope Benedict 1 year in advance.
Breaking news, Pope Benedict XVI announces his resignation.
Yeah, it is the first time in centuries a pope has stepped down.
And I knew Pope Benedict was going to step down April 2012.
Leaving the world wondering just who their insider at the Vatican really was. In 2013, they exposed the mysteries of Mount Graham, the Lucifer device,
This first station is an instrument called Lucifer.
and the Vatican's secret plan for the arrival of an alien savior. Then in 2015, they took the world underground to uncover the truth behind the Native American legends of giants, the portals they once came through, and the most overlooked aspect of end times prophecy regarding their return. Now, in their final entry to the explosive 4-year investigation, internationally acclaimed best-selling authors Thomas Horn and Cris Putnam unveil their greatest discovery and make their most astonishing prediction yet, involving the imminent prophesied arrival of a mysterious final Roman emperor.
At that time, the prince of injustice, who will be called the Antichrist, will rise. He will be the son of perdition and the culmination of pride. He will deceive many, but when the Roman Empire will fall, then the Antichrist will show himself, and he will sit in the house of God in Jerusalem. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone.
Thomas Horn, Cris Putnam. This will be the final entry and the greatest prediction yet, coming May 2016. The final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade. Coming exclusively from Skywatch TV for a very limited time starting May 31st, 2016. When you purchase the new book and final report from Tom Horn and Cris Putnam, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade, you'll receive the largest giveaway of 2016, an unprecedented value of over $200 in free books, DVDs, audio files, and a data DVD library with tens of thousands of pages of ancient literature no longer available, as well as movies, WikiLeaks files the government does not want you to see, and more for your library or to give away as gifts. Included in this biggest giveaway of 2016 are Cris Putnam's full-length DVD presentation, Astrobiology and the Vatican ET Connection, the new 5-part Skywatch TV special investigative report on the book, The Final Roman Emperor, plus 2 mystery books with a $40 value, and a data DVD library with thousands of pages of ancient literature, movies, and audio series for your library or to give away as gifts. And for the first several thousand customers while supplies last, you'll also receive Satan's Dirty Little Secret, the 2 demon spirits that all demons get their strength from. Satan, You Can't Have My Promises, the spiritual warfare guide to reclaim what's yours. What Happens When I Die, true stories of the afterlife and what they tell us about eternity. Becoming a Prayer Warrior, a guide to effective and powerful prayer. An unprecedented value of over $200 in never-before-offered free products. And the biggest giveaway of 2016, yours absolutely free when you purchase The Final Roman Emperor from skywatchtv.com for only $19.95 plus shipping, beginning May 31st. But be advised, this astonishing promotion is limited to first come, first serve while supplies last. So it's urgent, beginning May 31st, 2016. You place your order for the final book and biggest prediction yet in this 4-year investigation by internationally acclaimed best-selling authors Tom Horn and Cris Putnam. The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade for only $19.95 plus shipping. This offer is on a limited time basis and will end without notification. So be sure to visit skywatchtv.com to follow the updates in the countdown to the biggest giveaway of 2016. Order the new book by Tom Horn and Cris Putnam on May 31st to receive the unprecedented value of over $200 while supplies last. Free products limited to quantity on hand and may be replaced by products of equal value.
We've referenced an interview that we did with Tom Horn about his book, Zenith 2016. I encourage you to go back to our online content at skywatchtv.com. You'll find the YouTube channel there. You'll also find the Skywatch TV channel on Roku there. Look for the interview about the book, Zenith 2016, which gets more in-depth into the Kume Sybil and its links through the Freemasons to the Great Seal of the U.S. and what that actually prophesies, I should say. But Cris, the Islamic world essentially cribbed the character of the Mahdi from this pseudepigraphal prophecy, the Apocalypse of Methodius. So it sounds to me as though we've got these 2 characters that are both, neither one are sent by God, that both presume to be God's instrument of justice and judgment on earth that will lead to a final conflict. Do I read that right?
I think so. I think it's a perfect setup for Catholics who believe in this great Roman emperor or final Catholic king or however they want to put it, and the Muslims who believe in the Mahdi. It's basically the same literary character. It's a perfect setup for the Antichrist to fulfill the role in the minds of both people and bring it all together into a one-world religion. And we were told in the book of Revelation that the beast will be given authority over all nations, right? And so we expect that to happen. And what do we see? You know, we see the world, we see globalism occurring right now. And, you know, in analyzing ISIS or the Islamic State, you know, a lot of people think maybe the Antichrist will be a Muslim. I have a hard time accepting that the whole world's going to want to become Muslim. But I do see what we call the Hegelian dialectic, the idea that you can't really move people real radically over to one side, but you can push them a little bit by offering an antithesis, meaning, you know, you have a thesis, antithesis, synthesis is the way it works. Now, what is ISIS? What is the Islamic State? I think it's the perfect antithesis to Western values. I mean, Americans don't want to give up their freedom. They don't want to give up their guns, right? But 9/11, all of a sudden, we have the Patriot Act. We have our rights being taken away, and people are happy about it because they think they feel safer, right?
Right.
And now it takes hours to get to the airport. It's the perfect antithesis to freedom. And so what does that do? It moves the world a step closer to totalitarian control, to a new world order.
How much significance do we give the Pope Francis talking about the justification for a holy war?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really interesting. That's really what got the book idea started when Tom first emailed me about doing this project, is that Pope Francis was out in public using very specific language that if you read Catholic doctrine, they have a just war doctrine. What constitutes a just war, and what those requirements are. And I'd taken an ethics class, so I was familiar with these ideas. And yeah, the language that Pope Francis is using is like quoted directly from that. And he's talking about just cause and all these things that are kind of buzzwords.
Genocide and different words. And we do, Cris wrote 2 or 3 chapters in this book that really kind of spells out how we think our prediction is going to how it's going to roll out, and just war is going to be one of those causes. Basically, the ISIS is going to create a trigger event. We go into what we think is going to happen that is then going to cause the Pope to call for just war to be enacted, that would then allow the nations of the world, kind of like the first Iraq war where Bush got together and had a coalition army came together. But in this case, we're talking about the Vatican condoning that war under just war, which for the Muslims will be seen as a crusade.
Right.
They'll see this as the flag of Rome, and they'll see it as the fulfillment of their ancient hadith in which Muhammad allegedly said that at the end of time they're going to go to war against the army of Rome. So we think that's literally going to play out. But one thing I would just jump in here and add real quickly to what you're saying, Cris, is that look at what Pope Francis himself has been doing specifically. Just war is one of those things. He's out there. There's other leaders for the Vatican Church too. They've talked to the UN. They've even said this is based on church doctrine, which is a reference to just war. But look at what he's saying on the kind of the esoteric side of things. You've got the Muslims on this side saying we're going to kill the Pope. They made a movie showing their tanks coming down against the Colosseum. They show their flag flying. The reason why it's on the front of our book cover too, on the obelisk there in the middle of St. Peter's Square. But look at how Pope Francis has responded to this. First of all, he says that what's going on with ISIS, he said to the Christian community, what's happening with ISIS means you should prepare yourself for the end times. Yeah. He is literally connecting this to end of the world theology. But he also, as Cris pointed out, one of the first things he did when he became Pope was he dedicated the world to the Fatima apparition, the Our Lady of Fatima. But what does Fatima describe? The third secret of Fatima, the Pope's walking through the large city. Many people believe that's the Vatican. These ISIS-like fighters run in, they blow up everybody, they kill all the people that are assembled, they kill the Pope, right? He also knows that he is the final Pope in the prophecy of the popes. And how does that end? And after all these things, the city of Rome is destroyed. He's made friends with the priests that are what they call them, the ones that study the Zohar. And in the Zohar, it talks about how after 2013, the city of Rome is going to be destroyed. This is a 700-year-old prophecy. The Messiah will present himself, and shortly thereafter. And right now, what are the rabbis doing? The rabbis are saying, prepare for the Messiah. He's here. So there's something that's going on just beneath the surface that we believe is going to roll out over the next 48 months. And we're very specific about how we think that is going to play out. And we think the Pope is positioning himself right now. And the radical Islamists, they're ready. They're saying, bring it on, right?
Yeah.
It's what they want.
So they're looking for this character, the Mahdi, who will lead them to in battle against the forces of Christendom.
That's right.
Yeah. How do we as Christians then process all of this? Because we're looking at what is clearly whether we want to admit it or not as Americans, or certainly our politicians don't want to say this, but it is a religious war between the forces of Christendom, in a sense, under the banner of the Vatican, and the forces of Islam, at least as it's imagined by the by the Islamic State. How do we, as Christians who believe in the inerrancy of Bible prophecy, try to process all of this? Where do we discern the truth amongst all of these competing lies?
Well, Derek, one thing I did in this book is I tried to analyze all this from a different perspective than what you're hearing on the news. What you hear on the news is a very worldly, geopolitical, human analysis. And it's accurate most of the time, and they have good reasons for what they're saying. But what I'm trying to do is pull back from that and take what I call a long play perspective, in that having a supernatural worldview, believing that there are angels, immortals, that are playing out these ideas and things, fulfilling these Bible prophecies, pushing us toward this new world order. You don't see it happening in one human lifetime all the time, okay? These things are immortal beings. So if they have a strategy, it's occurring over centuries, not during your lifetime. So you might not notice it, right? But if you look at, from the early 20th century to now and see how things are pushing toward globalism, toward this idea of a new world order, it's amazing. And, you can look at ISIS more as a tool to push us toward that than them actually being the Antichrist or something like that. That's the kind of perspective I'm looking at. And the thing that was really fascinating, I don't know about this exactly, I can't say it's true or not, but there's a letter supposedly written to Albert Pike by an Italian Freemason named Mazzini.
Mazzini, yeah.
And in that letter, allegedly, they predict that they're going to use 3 world wars to accomplish this new world order. And the first 2 are described so accurately, it's uncanny. Now, what's interesting is there's a Catholic priest who wrote a book. It was copyrighted like 1920. And he mentions this letter. And it was before the Second World War. And it really described the forces of the Jews fighting, being persecuted by the Nazis. It's really accurate. And if it's true, it's astounding. But the thing that's most astounding is that the Third World War is the Muslims against the Christians.
A spoiler alert for our audience, there is a guest chapter in this book that was written by Derek Gilbert, and it really has to do with how this final Roman emperor, who the New Testament would call the Antichrist, is going to be accepted by the Muslims as their Mahdi, by the Jews as their Messiah, and by the Christians perhaps as the second coming of Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what it comes down to, is that an improper understanding of prophecy can lead us all into error. And that's why it's important to understand what is lying ahead. The final Roman emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's last crusade, the biggest giveaway of 2016 from Defender Publishing and Skywatch TV. Tom Horn, Cris Putnam, excellent work, and an honor to be even mentioned between the covers of this book with you gentlemen. Get your copy and share it with friends, because it is a roadmap of what is to come. And we thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is Skywatch TV.